I was driving through the mountains of West Virginia when the snow started. Not a gentle flurry, the kind that builds layer by layer until the world goes quiet. My phone had no signal for over an hour, GPS frozen mid-route. The road was barely visible in the high beams, and when I finally saw a hand-painted sign for the Hillside Inn, I turned in without thinking twice. Anything to get off that road. The inn sat at the edge of a dense tree line, its roof sagging under years of snow. The sign out front was half buried, the word Hillside fading from the paint. Inside, the heat hit me like a wall. A tall, thin man behind the counter looked up from an old ledger. Not a computer, not even a calculator. Just a fountain pen dipping into a small ink bottle. He smiled, polite but tired, and asked if I needed a room for the night. I handed him cash since the card reader on the counter was unplugged. He slid a heavy brass key across to me, the number 7 carved deep into it. Before I turned to leave, he said quietly, "Don't look through the second-floor window after midnight." I laughed, a dry sound from someone too tired to care about local superstition. But he didn't join in. He just stared at me until I nodded. The inn smelled faintly of wood smoke and old varnish. The kind of scent that clings to the walls, the bed sheets, even your clothes. My room was small but warm. Faded wallpaper, creaky floors, and an old radiator humming like a tired animal. There was a large window facing the front courtyard where my car was parked. I could still see the faint glow of the inn's sign flickering in the snow. I showered, turned on the TV, static on every channel, and sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through photos I'd taken earlier in the day. The battery warning flashed red. I plugged in my phone, but the outlet didn't work. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 11:47. I remember that number clearly because that's when I started to feel uneasy. The wind outside had picked up. The kind that whistled through window frames and old wood. Every few minutes I swore I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate. But whenever I checked, the hall was empty. I laid down and tried to sleep, but it felt like something was pulling my attention toward the window. Not a sound, not even a movement, just an awareness, a wait. By the time I looked at the clock again, it read 12:03. Midnight. Snow was falling heavier now, swirling beneath the yellow light from the lampposts outside. And that's when I saw her. She stood at the edge of the courtyard, a woman in a thin, torn nightgown, barefoot in the snow. Her hair was dark, long, tangled in the wind. She wasn't moving, just facing the inn, head slightly tilted down like she was listening. At first I thought maybe it was another guest. Someone locked out, maybe drunk or confused. I started to reach for the window latch, maybe to yell, maybe to wave her inside. But something stopped me. The longer I looked, the more wrong she seemed. Her hair moved with the wind, but her body didn't. I don't know how long I watched her. Time stretched in that strange way it does when you're scared but too afraid to look away. Then slowly she lifted her head. Even through the falling snow I could feel her eyes find the window. My window. My throat tightened, breath caught. For the first time she moved. One step forward, then another. The lights in the courtyard flickered. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and yanked the curtains shut. I sat there in the dark. The only sound, the hum of the radiator and the faint crunch of snow outside. I wanted to leave right then, but every instinct told me not to open that door. Sometime after 1 a.m., I must have fallen asleep sitting up because I woke to a soft tapping sound. It was coming from the window, tap, tap, tap. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound came again, slower this time, like fingertips brushing the glass. I whispered to myself that it was just a tree branch or ice forming on the pane, but I knew better. The nearest tree was 20 feet away. When dawn finally came, I pulled the curtains back. The snow was untouched. Not a single footprint. I packed up and went downstairs. The man from last night was already at the counter, reading the same ledger. He didn't look surprised to see me so early. "Sleep well?" he asked. I said nothing, just handed him the key. He nodded once like he already knew. Before I walked out, I turned back. "That woman," I said, "the one outside last night. Do you know who she is?" He looked at me for a long time, then said, "You must have had one of them dreams. Happens sometimes." When I pressed, his eyes hardened. "You should go. Roads will freeze again by noon." That was all he said. The drive out was slow. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone standing on the road. When I reached the next town, I stopped at a diner for coffee. The waitress asked where I'd come from, and when I said Hillside Inn, her expression changed immediately. "You stayed there?" she said quietly. "Yeah, why?" She hesitated. "That place hasn't been open in years. They closed it down after the thing with Mrs. Lowell. The name meant nothing to me," she went on, voice low. "She used to own the inn. Back in '62, her husband left her during a blizzard. They found her months later, frozen just outside the front steps. They said she'd been waiting for him to come back. I felt my skin go cold. "I saw her," I said without meaning to. The waitress didn't laugh. She just nodded like she'd heard that before. When I looked up the inn later that night, there were photos online, faded black and whites. But one image caught me off guard. It was the old lobby, exactly as I'd seen it. Same front desk, same key rack, same brass numbers. And behind the counter, standing beside a man who looked just like the one who'd checked me in, was a woman. Her hair long and dark, her eyes fixed on the camera with that same strange sadness. The caption read, "Thomas and Lillian Lowell, proprietors of Hillside Inn, circa 1961. I never found that inn again." The next time I drove that stretch of highway, there was nothing at the turnoff but a snow-covered clearing and a few old timbers buried in the drift. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I still think about that window. The way the snow looked under the lamplight, the figure in the nightgown, and the way her head turned toward me, slow and deliberate, like she'd been waiting all that time for someone to look back. And every winter since. Around midnight, I'll wake for no reason at all, heart pounding. That same cold feeling crawling through my chest, and I'll swear I can hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. Would you like me to generate cinematic image prompts for each major beat? Arrival, first night unease, window scene, morning departure, final revelation? That would make it ready for visual production or narration sequencing. I've been driving long enough to know the sound of a bad CB signal. The hiss, the crackle, the way voices bleed through when two channels overlap. You get used to it, especially hauling radio equipment through the back roads of West Virginia. But that night on Route 17, it wasn't just static. It was something else. It was close to midnight when I hit that stretch of road, a two-lane pass that cut between the ridgelines like a scar. My truck's headlights swallowed by fog, the world behind me fading into black. The station had sent me out to pick up a replacement transmitter from a tower site near Beckley, and I was dead tired. Nursing the same lukewarm coffee I'd been sipping since Charleston, the radio had been buzzing in and out all night. I kept it on mostly for company. Long hauls feel different in those mountains. The quiet presses in on you, the kind that makes you start talking to yourself just to break the silence. Somewhere past mile marker 42, the static started to thin out, like the air before a storm. Then I heard a voice. It wasn't another trucker. It wasn't a call sign or a joke. It was a woman's voice, soft, calm, almost curious. And she said my name. My real name. At first I thought I'd misheard it. Maybe the fatigue was catching up with me. But then she said it again, slow, clear, like she was testing the sound of it. My hands froze on the wheel. The radio crackled again, louder this time, and I felt the skin on my neck rise. I switched channels, thinking someone was screwing around, but the voice came back. Same tone, same calmness. "You shouldn't be out here," she said. I pulled off to the shoulder, engine idling. The snow was light, but the air was thick with fog, swallowing the road ahead. I turned the radio down, but the voice kept coming, quieter now, like it was leaking through the speakers even with the power off. She whispered something, numbers. I grabbed a pen from the dash and wrote them on a napkin, coordinates. Against every bit of better judgment, I opened my Maps app. The coordinates pointed to an old rest stop about 10 miles off the main route. I almost laughed. It was too perfect, a ghost story setup. But curiosity's a dangerous thing when you've been alone too long. So I drove. The road narrowed as I went, climbing higher into the ridge. No signs, no streetlights. Just the faint reflection of my headlights off snow-covered guardrails. At one point my phone buzzed with a text from the station engineer. "Signal looks clean. You on the move?" I started typing a reply but stopped. No service. When I reached the turnoff, there it was, the rest stop. It looked abandoned, like nobody had used it in decades. The lot was half buried in snow, the vending machines dark and empty. But there, right in the center, was a single payphone. It was ringing. The sound cut through the cold air, steady and mechanical. I killed the engine and just sat there staring. The ring was so sharp it almost didn't belong. Too alive in a place that felt dead. I stepped out, boots crunching in the snow, and the air hit me hard, cold enough to sting my lungs. The phone rang again. When I picked it up, the line hissed. That same voice came through clear and close. "You shouldn't have come." Every sound around me vanished. No wind, no hum of the truck engine, just the voice. "Do you see it?" she asked. I turned, scanning the fog. Nothing, just the faint glow of my headlights through the mist. "See what?" I said, my voice breaking more than I meant it to. She didn't answer. Just breathing, slow, deliberate, like someone was standing inches away. Then faintly I heard something else. A second voice, deeper, distorted by static. It was repeating the same coordinates. The phone went dead. I dropped it and backed toward the truck, heart pounding. But when I turned the ignition, the dashboard lights flickered. Every speaker in the cab came alive. That same whispering static, the woman's voice mixed with another tone underneath it. Like a signal trying to form words. I floored it, tires spinning in the snow until they caught. The radio kept pulsing, volume spiking without me touching it. I switched the system off completely, but the noise didn't stop. It was still coming through the cabin, vibrating through the metal frame. It took nearly an hour before Route 17 came back into view. The moment I hit the highway, the sound vanished. Total silence. When I got to the station just before dawn, I told the engineer what happened. He checked the frequency logs, shaking his head. "There's nothing on that band," he said. "Hasn't been for years." I laughed it off, called it a long night hallucination. But when I looked down, the napkin with the coordinates was still there. Later that week, I tried to check them again. Satellite maps showed nothing. No rest stop, no structures. Just forest. I drove back out there anyway, in daylight this time. The turnoff was gone. Just a guardrail and an overgrown embankment. A few days later, I started noticing something strange. Every time I drove that same stretch, the radio would cut out at the same spot. Always around mile marker 42, always followed by a brief whisper of static. Once I swear I heard her again, faint, almost buried in the noise. She said my name, and for just a second I thought I could hear someone else on the line. A man's voice calling hers. The engineer still insists that frequency doesn't exist. But I've kept the CB tuned to that band ever since. Some nights, when the weather turns and the static gets deep enough, I still hear it. The soft hum of interference giving way to that same calm voice. Sometimes she says my name. Sometimes she just breathes. And every once in a while, if I listen closely, I can still make out the coordinates. I stopped writing them down a long time ago. Back in college, I worked night security for a campus that used to be an old psychiatric hospital. Most students didn't know that part. They just thought the place had weird energy. But I knew. The old files were still in storage, and the basement tunnels had signs with names scratched off, rooms bricked over. I took the job because it paid better than the library shifts, and because at the time, I didn't believe in anything I couldn't see. There were 9 buildings on the property, though only 8 were used for classes. Building 9 sat on the far end of the campus, past the tree line, half swallowed by vines and fog. It had been converted into faculty offices and a few storage rooms, but no one liked working late there. The lights flickered, the motion sensors tripped for no reason, and sometimes, according to the janitors, you could hear someone walking in the upstairs corridor after midnight. Most nights. I stayed inside the main security hub, watching the monitors. Every hour, I was supposed to do a patrol around the campus perimeter, check doors, windows, motion alarms. It was boring work, until the night I decided to stay in Building 9 longer than usual. That night, the temperature dropped fast. It was early February, and the fog came down so thick you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. The radio chatter from the other guards was quiet. 2 of them called out sick. So it was just me and an older guy named Fletcher covering the whole campus. Around 2:30 a.m., one of the motion sensors in Building 9 went off. It wasn't unusual, that building always did that. Usually you'd reset the panel and it'd be fine. But then the second floor sensor tripped. Then the basement. One after another, like something was moving through the building. I called Fletcher on the radio. "You picking up anything on your end?" "Static." Then his voice. Nah, everything's quiet over here, you. Building 9's acting up again. He laughed, a dry, tired sound. Leave it. Those sensors are junk. I almost did. But something about the way the signals moved, in order, like a person walking, got under my skin. So I grabbed my flashlight and keys and headed out. The air outside felt heavier than usual, wet and cold enough to bite through my jacket. I crossed the quad and reached Building 9. The door groaned when I pushed it open. Inside, it smelled like dust and old paper, the kind of smell that sits in your throat. The first floor was empty, the offices dark except for the green glow of emergency exit signs. My boots echoed through the hall. I stopped by the motion sensor panel and reset it. The lights blinked, then steadied. That should have been the end of it. But as I turned to leave, I heard something upstairs. A faint creak, like weight shifting on old floorboards. I called up, half joking, "Security. Anyone here?" No answer. I climbed the stairs, each step groaning under me. The air got colder the higher I went. My breath came out in white clouds. The hall at the top was lined with closed doors, some marked storage, others just numbered. Room 213, 215, 219. The numbers stopped there. At the end of the hallway, where there should have been a corner, there was something else. A door that didn't match the others. Heavy gray metal with no number, just flaking paint. It looked wrong, like it didn't belong to this building, and from behind it, I swear I heard breathing. Slow, steady human. I raised my flashlight. The handle was old, rusted, but still turned. When I pulled the door open, the light flickered once, and then the hallway behind me went black. Inside, there was a long, narrow room. Bare concrete walls. A single chair sitting in the middle. My beam landed on it, and for a split second I thought the chair was empty. Then I saw the man. He was sitting perfectly still, head tilted forward, hands resting on his knees. His clothes were old, maybe a patient's uniform, faded white with gray stains. The shadows hid his face completely, but I could see his chest rise and fall, slow and deliberate, like he was breathing through a thick fog. "Sir?" I said, my voice shaking. No movement. I stepped closer, maybe 5 feet away now. The temperature dropped again, so cold it hurt to inhale. I could see frost forming along the walls. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice, and in that blink, he was gone. The chair was still there. Rocking gently back and forth, I stumbled backward, slammed into the doorframe. My flashlight fell and rolled, the beam cutting across the floor. The room was empty. Just the sound of the chair creaking. I don't remember leaving the building. 1 second I was standing there. The next I was outside, gasping in the freezing air. Fletcher found me about 20 minutes later, sitting on the curb, white as a sheet. I told him someone was in there. He checked room by room. Nothing. The next morning I went to the facilities office. The manager, a short guy named Carl, looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. I told him what I'd seen, the door, the man, the chair. He just nodded slowly and said, "There's no room like that in Building 9. I thought he was messing with me, so I insisted he come up and see. We went together that afternoon. The hallway was there, but the gray door wasn't. Just smooth plaster wall, like it had never existed. Carl rubbed the back of his neck. That wing's been sealed off since the 70s, after a patient froze to death in one of the observation rooms. Power went out during a snowstorm. They didn't find him until the morning. I didn't believe him, not really, but he looked dead serious. After that, I stopped taking Building 9 patrols. I swapped shifts, made excuses. Still, sometimes around 2:43 a.m., the motion sensors in that building would go off again, one after another, just like that night. A few weeks later, Fletcher called me over the radio. His voice sounded off. "Hey, you seeing the feed from 9? I pulled up the monitor. The hallway camera was showing static, but through the distortion, I could make out movement. Something rocking back and forth, a chair, then the feed cut out completely. The next morning, when maintenance checked the floor, they found a single rusted chair sitting in the middle of the hall, one that hadn't been there the day before. They removed it. Threw it out, apparently, but every night after I swore I could still hear it, the faint creak of wood echoing through the walls. By spring, I quit the job, found something else. But that building, I still dream about it. About that gray door, the cold that hits just before you hear someone breathe behind you. And every so often, when I'm walking alone at night, I feel it again. That sudden drop in temperature, that pull in the air, like something wants to be remembered once. I drove past the old campus. Building 9 was dark, its windows boarded, but one light was still on in the upper corridor. It flickered, twice, then went out.